Welcome to a Celtic State of Mind. I'm John Dykes, and today I am delighted once again to be joined by Tony Haggerty, who is a regular feature on the Monday ACSOM Bulletin, and David Sleight, who has been in and out of the bulletins over the last year or so. David, welcome back to the show. It's great to see you guys. It's the start of a new week. We should be starting a new week in a positive fashion. But as always, there's loads to talk about in the world of Celtic, as well as 3-0 league victories. But we will start off with that because, you know, it was a decent enough victory, I felt. I've seen a lot of stuff online about it being a Neil Lennon-esque performance. I've seen a lot of people saying that, Tony. I was chuffed to get the win. It was fairly comfortable, I think, at half-time. On the Bulletin, Laura and I spoke about Ayeti and the fact he was pretty anonymous. He goes out and scores 2 goals. Delighted for him on that front. What do you make of that game at the weekend? Job done. Let's move on to Betis on Thursday night, Tony.
Very much so. It's a case of job done. Results are paramount for Celtic at this minute in time. How you get them, it's neither here nor there.
So you're right, Tony. I mean, it is important that you focus on getting the 3 points on the board. You know, looking at that league table, obviously after the Hearts and Hibs draw and saying, well, our target is Rangers are 3 points ahead of us, and we're basically wanting to be within touching distance, and I hate saying that, by Christmas in terms of the league title, because, you know, that would be an improvement.
You remember, you come back from an international break and the star striker was injured. Mm-hmm. So that threw the kind of plans into turmoil a bit. You know, you handed debuts to Cameron Carter-Vickers, Jota. You know, not sure how they're going to go. You know, they came through them with flying colours. No, all right. I think the problem is they set a high bar in the last 2 home games with 6-0 destructions of Dundee and St Mirren. You're not going to win 6-0 every weekend when you're at home. That's just not possible. I think people have been a bit dismayed with the football that wasn't up to that standard. Even Ange himself, I think, said it was just all right. But at least you're saying all right, and they won 3-0. You know, it took them a while to break Ross County down. I think people are getting frustrated with that element of fortune that broke them down. You know, and I agreed with you. I had to change my man-by-mans very swiftly about the Jetty. I get 2 more kicks in the Jetty, but I didn't get 2 more goals in the Jetty. You know what I mean? And the thing to say about him was, yeah, he was largely anonymous for most of that game, but his 2 goals were 2 strikers and 2 poachers' instinct goals. So that you can't teach. You know, just maybe want him to get more involved. But he was there in the right place at the right time to head both of those goals in. So, you know, you can't fault him for that. That's what strikers do. You know, had Henrik Larsson did that in his pomp and people say, oh, he was brilliant. You know, so I like you, thought he was pretty ordinary, but it takes extraordinary skill to be in the right place at the right time as a striker. His first headed goal was a lot more difficult than it looked, and then the second one he stooped very low. You know, again, difficult skill, but in there to do it. So I'll cut him some slack, and hopefully he takes a confidence boost from that himself, because he looked like a man who, when he went through on goal with that first chance that McGregor set up from, didn't he look confident enough that he was going to finish it? Don't know what you thought as he ran through. I didn't feel, you know, so hopefully he relaxes a bit. You know, I get back to it. Strikers need to relax,
yeah.
and let it flow. He did what was natural to him. He threw himself at those 2 headers and scored, because that comes natural to him.
What you're talking about there, it brings back this, and I'm not comparing the players, but it brings back an interview I listened to by Kenny Dalglish, where he was asked to describe his goal for Scotland against Spain, and he couldn't describe it. He said, I can describe it by looking at it on the screen, but I can't tell you what was going through my head, because it was just natural. It was instinctive. And I think that comes with confidence. The minute a player lacks a bit of confidence, they seem to second guess what they're going to do next. They don't do what is natural to them. And I think that first chance he had in the first half seemed a wee bit like that. It was a wee bit laboured, David.
It was. And you could see that Ayeti was understandably struggling for confidence at the start of the game. I noticed he kept sort of pointing to teammates as if he was about to make a run, but he never made the run, and the teammates didn't make the pass. And it may be a sort of lack of confidence on his part, not making the runs, or a lack of confidence perhaps on the part of his teammates as well. all the better to see him get those 2 goals in the second half. I think that would have done his confidence no harm at all. And I thought he looked a livelier player once he got the 2 goals. He seemed to be buzzing a bit more. We certainly missed Kyogo's movement in the first half. And at times, by comparison, Yeti looked a bit static. But so much of a striker's makeup is down to self-confidence, and it would be understandable if Yeti was a wee bit short of that at the moment. But hopefully those 2 goals will have done him a lot of good. A lot of other positives to take from Saturday. I thought Jota had a good game out on the left, particularly in the first half, faded a bit second half. Cameron Carter-Vickers' man of the match performance speaks for itself. Chipped in with the goal. Juranovic at right back, maybe a wee bit less convincing than he was at Ibrox, but there were some positives to take, even if the performance was a wee bit laboured compared to the last 2 home games.
Yeah, it was. Now, we might be in a situation where Kyogo comes back in, Tony. We've got a striker and a Yeti with more confidence, so that you can call upon him perhaps to bring him into specific games where you're looking for more of a poacher's instinct, or periods of a game where you want to throw him in. And then, of course, we've got Giakoumakis, who we've not seen in action in a Celtic jersey yet. And we could actually have a situation there where we are far better covered should Giakoumakis hit the ground running, and we've got 3 strikers who can do specific jobs. Now, David already mentioned we did have a couple of debutants, one of whom put in a man-of-the-match performance and got a goal. The other, I thought Jota was very impressive in the first half. If there wasn't perhaps the finished product, and a lot of people have been saying that it's his finished kind of product, his end product that you're looking at. He faded a wee bit, but Abada came into the game, so it wasn't a massive concern. When we're looking ahead to Thursday, Tony, how many of these players are in the manager's starting lineup? And I would include also Juranovic, who David mentioned, but also young Adam Montgomery, who I think came on and acquitted himself very, very well.
Yeah, I got pelters for my man-by-mans because I gave Montgomery a 5, but only due to the fact that he played 40, whatever it was, minutes. I toyed with the idea of giving him a 6 because I quite like Adam Montgomery. And when he's came on and played at left back, he's really acquitted himself well. He's did nothing wrong. So I would actually quite like, if Taylor's not available, then I wouldn't mind seeing Adam Montgomery there. I think he looks quite, looks very natural. And Celtic got a forward boost when he came on as well. Juranovic, again, I thought he did okay, but others said he got skinned a few times, so it's all about opinion, isn't it? But I quite like the look of Jota. I think once Jota hits his stride and Kyogo's come back into the side, I think they can link up really well. I think Jota's got that eye for that killer through pass, and that Kyogo could latch onto no problem at all.
Yeah.
Very skillful. In the first half, I thought, I just thought he was maybe guilty of trying too hard, to impress. But he has some skills and tricks, and he looks like, once he's at it, he's bang at it. I think he'll be a wonderful asset for Celtic moving forward, and I think he'll enjoy it as well. No faded the second half, but a lot of the ball went down the right-hand side to Abada's side, didn't it? The cross for the second goal came from Abada's side. So, I don't mind that, but I thought he showed enough for me to put himself into contention, certainly, because you're going to have to go to Real Betis and score, aren't you? To get a result. So, Jetty hopefully has got confidence, but Carter-Vickers is just a big unit, isn't he? He's a kind of throwback to big units of defenders that Celtic quite liked, and Martin O'Neill particularly liked. That kind of no-nonsense. And strolled forward and, had the wherewithal to take a shot at goal. You don't shoot, you'll no score, but just decided, I'm having it. Okay, it's took a massive deflection, but it's ended up in the back of the net. It's ended up where he wanted it, and the team needed that break at that particular time. But I just look at players and I think, right, can you master the basics, especially defenders? And I thought, you'll do it for me. And I think a lot of Celtic supporters felt like that too, that, he looks rugged, he looks like kind of no nonsense, and I think Starfelt felt comfortable with him.
Yeah.
By the side, felt more comfortable, and I think that says a lot. That presence gives you that physique. You look there and you think, well, any centre forward like, oh, we're in the game. And I'm not saying he's the finished article by any stretch, but I think a lot of Celtic supporters felt the same. Starfelt, they felt comfortable because they looked at him and thought, you know what, you'll do a job, you'll be all right.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
yeah.
So I was quite happy with Carter Vickers, and the man of the match, as David said, performance said it all, really.
You know, last week we were speaking about, as you're able to do, you're able to speculate on what you feel the predicted lineup is going to be leading up to a game. And I was talking about, giving Carter Vickers his debut at the expense of Stephen Welsh. And Stephen Welsh is a player who I've long championed. I really like him. I think he's been a very good acquisition to the squad. He's come through the youth process at Celtic, and when was the last time we had a centre-half to do that and actually play 50 or more games, which Welsh is heading towards? And you're probably going back to Steve McManus, because we haven't. There's been a real dearth of centre-halves come through the Celtic ranks in recent times. And then on the right-hand side, the decision was made for Ange Postecoglou because obviously Ralston failed to make the game, and we're unaware at this moment in time if he's going to make it on Thursday night. And when I spoke about that, David, I spoke about the fact that, the likelihood is Juranovic would start, but Carter Vickers would probably start as well, and Ralston and Welsh would drop out. There was some criticism around that saying, well, you've got to give youngsters a chance. And I get that, because I'd love for half the team to be youth graduates. But when you bring in these players in, and in the case of Juranovic with a fee, I think that the manager's bringing them in to play them. And there are going to be some casualties or fall guys. And unfortunately, that fell on Ralston through illness and Welsh. When it comes up to Thursday night, do you think we're going to stick with those two? Because I do get the feeling that Ange Postecoglou sees them as part of his first choice back four.
Yeah, I reckon he does too. So I would expect those two to play on Thursday night against Real Betis. I understand the point about the likes of Ralston and Welsh, but they can't play all the games. And Ange Postecoglou made that very point a couple of weeks ago. The point of bringing in the extra players is to have cover, if possible, in every position, and to ensure that we don't run the likes of Ralston and Welsh, just young guys, into the ground at this stage of their careers. And in that regard, I think everybody, looks on in amazement at Callum McGregor and crosses their fingers every time a heavy tackle comes in on him, because the number of miles in his legs is, are quite simply phenomenal. And he's so key to everything that we do. A lot of people were surprised when he was subbed as early as he was on Saturday, with Celtic just one up at the time. But I think that was Ange just thinking ahead to Thursday and thinking about the minutes that McGregor's played, and of course called up on international duty, trip over to Vienna during the week. He simply can't do it all, and neither can Ralston or Welsh. But I'm sure that we'll see Juranovic and Cameron Carter-Vickers play on Thursday night. But I'm sure also that Ralston, Welsh and the others will have a part to play as the season progresses.
Yeah, without a doubt. And it was a good decision, I think, on McGregor whenever possible. Even if it's a half hour here or there, give him that rest, Tony. And I think the other, question around Thursday's lineup, when you're looking at the predicted lineup, would be around about the man you gave a 5 to, young Montgomery. Again, coming through the ranks, been very impressed with him, I've got to say. I think he's got the defensive element to his game, but he's also very comfortable going forward on the left-hand side. And I think that we've unearthed the wee gem in Adam Montgomery, and I think he will be in the same kind of category, although he's not at the same amount of games as the aforementioned Welsh and Ralston. But I think he's going to get game time alongside these two guys. So what are they, 19, 21 and 22? So for me, on Thursday night, I'm going to go back to what I said about the Rangers game. I wanted Montgomery to play. I wanted him to start because he's come on in the European game when Welsh has done his shoulder for the first time. And I thought he acquitted himself really well. And I thought he'd done enough at that stage, Tony, to play against Rangers at Ibrox. And I understand the balance there because, you're getting thrown into the cauldron at that point. I was disappointed to see that he went for someone else out of position. But I think this time round, it's a must that Montgomery starts on Thursday night. Would you agree with that, Tony?
Without a doubt, I agree with it on two counts. One, because of the way he played on Saturday. he just settled in and did very well. Probably should have been a 6 in my area, but it wasn't. But there you go. You win some, you lose some. And also, I don't want Taylor to play if his shoulder's going to pop again. You don't want to be burning a sub. Whenever that befalls you, you'd rather say, right, you know what, sit it out until you're fine to come back and there's no effects. Because what if Taylor's shoulder goes, first challenge, and then you're bringing on Montgomery, you're burning a substitute. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah,
could be early, could be like whatever time. So just say, go with Montgomery. He's done nothing wrong in the times we've asked him to deputise for Taylor in that position. Then what a confidence boost that is to the young kid as well. On you go. I'm trusting you now in a game of this magnitude. Go and enjoy yourself. Mm-hmm. And as I said on Friday, Celtic have to go and enjoy this Europa League group stage. Go and enjoy it. Go and have a rip at it. Let's go and get a result. Go and go out there and play whatever way they're going to play. But above all else, get a result. And away games are going to be key, aren't they? Remember the first ever Champions League group stage that they featured in? They won all 3 at home and never got a point away from home. Robbed in Juventus the first night, and that came back to bite them because they're one of the few teams who've actually gone out at any group stage of any competition on 9 points. It's incredible. Mm-hmm. And Celtic right now would probably bite your hand off for 9 points because you'd probably qualify in 9 points right now from that group. So it just shows you the importance of going away from home, digging in and getting a result. Any kind of positive.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you go there and you play a team that's capable of getting a result, and I think Celtic are capable of going to Spain and getting a result. I said before, I don't look at this group and it puts the fear of death into me. I trust the manager and I'll trust his team formation that he picks. And I think I agree with you. I think Montgomery's earned that. Because if there's still a doubt over Taylor, then don't go in with any doubts. Don't go in with any negativity thinking, if he goes, it could last 5 minutes, it could last 55.
Yeah.
No doubts. Take that out of the equation. Play Montgomery.
I think so. A couple of more points to talk about for this week's game before we move into some of the other issues that are around about Celtic Park at the moment. But one of them I would suggest is when you look at the defeats other than the Rangers defeat this season, a lot of that I think has been down to the fact that we've been so threadbare at the back. You think of the Beaton-Welsh partnership that quickly became Murray and Welsh, and then that fell into the second leg against Midtjylland. And then we bring in a new centre-half, and we're so keen to play him that he's thrown in at Tynecastle alongside Beaton. And I think that, even though they've only played one game together, I do feel a wee bit more confident, David, in that defence that we played on Saturday there, for them to go into this European game, even though the left-back position will not be our first pick because Taylor is our first pick. I'm pretty confident in that defence going into Thursday night's game. Yeah,
I'm more confident than I was a month ago. But remember that, Ross, there were a few near misses on Saturday. Ross County really ought to have scored at least one of the chances that they had. So we're still vulnerable at the back. I think Carl Starfelt's had a bit of a bum rap since he came in. I don't feel like he's done an awful lot wrong. I thought he had a good game at Ibrox, and I think he'll settle in the fullness of time and prove to be a good acquisition. But the whole back four looked a hell of a lot more solid with Cameron Carter-Vickers in there at the weekend. And I know, a lot of people, just some sort of notional first choice starting 11s floating around on social media over the weekend. A lot of people had Montgomery in the first choice 11. And maybe it's a bit too early to say that, but he certainly made a real impact when he came on at the weekend, and he's acquitted himself very well anytime he's represented Celtic in recent weeks. So I'm sure he'll play on Thursday. And as you say, I think the whole defence has a more solid and robust look to it than it did 4 or 5 weeks ago. Perhaps wouldn't be hard.
No, you're right. And by the way, I like the look of Murray. The future seems to be bright with players like Murray and that coming through, Of course, there has been other issues in and around Celtic Park. It was a slow news week last week, Tony. So slow. And then Friday night happens and Laura and I jump on to give a reaction to that. And the big thing for me on the back of that reaction was some people thought we went in studs up on the board. Others said, you've got to be careful with the wording when it comes to personal reasons. But I think there's a huge nuance there because personal reasons and personal issues are two completely different things. A personal reason could be, I don't want to work for you. I can't work with you. My promises or my vision isn't being fulfilled within this role. So I wasn't reading too much into that. I also know that obviously when the club are announcing something of this magnitude and it's getting announced to the stock exchange, they need to do it in such a way, Tony, that there's no panic. You know, it doesn't look as though Celtic are running about with their hair on fire, as some might suggest. So Patrick Murphy comes in. Welcome to the show, Patrick. You're watching on YouTube. We can only speculate on what's happened. An outsider looking in, our board does seem to be against modernisation because it'd highlight their inefficiencies and would cost money. We go on as dinosaurs. Now, yeah, there's always an element of speculation, but isn't that what alternative media is? Because media is often something that's been fed by the source. So it's going to be fed by the football club directly, Tony. It's going to be fed by a government, and it's going to be reported as gospel. Then you have a different view on it. You have an alternative look at the situation. So, yeah, we will never know the ins and outs. But one thing we did predict, Laura and I, is that we're going to get the official statement, and then we're going to get a couple of leaks into various newspapers, and that's exactly what happened. What do you make of all that? And we'll not talk about the Charlie Mulgrew genuine voicemail against the other one, the not so genuine one, because it was turning into farce by that stage. What did you make of the events of Friday?
I was talking to David off camera just before you came in, and I burst out laughing. I says, I might be in the minority here, but I was one of the few that actually looked at that and couldn't really give a toss. Because CEOs and all that, I'm as detached as I'll ever be from CEOs and Celtic board members. All we have in common is Celtic. But I've said to you many times, I know I'm a Celtic supporter. I question whether they are, real Celtic supporters. All I care about is the three things that make Celtic Football Club, in my opinion. That's the supporters, the manager and the players. And so when the news filtered through, I was disappointed because I thought Dom McKay was taking Celtic down the kind of route where they were more media friendly, more fan media friendly for a start, and modernisation of the club. But was I shocked and surprised by it? No, really. And then when it said Michael Nicholson is taking over as acting CEO, my first thought was, who are you? Who are you? Because I don't really know these people, and as I say, I'm as detached as anyone from them, and I shouldn't really know them, You remind them that, yeah, they might be custodians of the club, but they genuinely don't speak for the Celtic support. They don a club blazer and a club tie. I've said it before. They represent themselves. Their vision of Celtic is measured in balance sheets and customer bases and money. Ours isn't.
Did he even refer? Well, the very fact they call you a customer is an issue, isn't it? Because we're fans, not fans. Customers. Yeah.
We spoke about that last season when we were having a pop at the board many times. And the great thing about the weekend was our manager. Our manager was sensational when he was asked about in the media. White noise. He kept saying, that's over there. I'll let them have their squabble. And he even said to a guy, if you think that nothing in my head focusing on Ross County, then you've read me wrong. I love that. He was channeling all his energy into getting a result on the park, which is what you and I care about. And he drummed that into the players. Forget that. That's out there. And the only reason we put up with the board is because they have the daily running and the future of the club in their hands, which sadly, and I've said it before, until a new broom comes in and you get real Celtic men, supporters, and those with a Celtic state of mind and a real Celtic state of mind who care deeply about the club and where it's going, then, things will pick up and you'll see things. But with this current board, and I've also said, meet the new boss, same as the old boss. We've just been fooled again. Is that the stunt they've pulled with McKay? And the biggest casualty, you said, there's the truth. The truth, only one person knows the truth here. It's Dominic McKay. And the various others that on the board will know a version of truth. But Dominic McKay's the only man that will tell you what happened and he's signed a non-disclosure agreement, so you'll never know. And true to form, Celtic then started their close friends in the media, be it broadcast, be it print, and whoever's closest to people that go up that board chain, they start feeding out things. So you're getting half-truths here and half-truths there. Wild speculation, lots of people who think they're in the know actually the square root of zilch. You're putting it out there and it all feeds into that kind of machine. You know, Dominic McKay's the only one that could tell you the truth here. And he signed the NDA, and maybe in a few years it will come out. You know, but as...
Tony makes some interesting points there, and you know, he said at the top that he didn't really care to a certain extent who the CEO of Celtic was. I know what he means, but I'm of a similar view, but for perhaps different reasons. I actually don't think running an £80 million turnover business is all that difficult, and I think there's probably any number of people that could do it. You know, I know people running businesses 4 or 5 times the size of Celtic for a tenth of the salary that the CEO gets. But the thing that sets the Celtic CEO job apart, and something that Michael Nicholson will need to think carefully about, is the media profile that goes with it and the general fallout associated with any missteps and you know, social media scrutiny, people like us talking about it, so on and so forth. So that's the big difference. It's just the media profile that the position has, and that's where Celtic have, to my mind, consistently fallen short in the last 18 months. The communication has been so poor, and the guy who's done the best job communicating in recent weeks, effectively the de facto spokesman for the club, has been Ange Postecoglou, and you know, he dealt absolutely effortlessly with questions around the CEO issue over the weekend. Immediately after the Ross County game, kind of swatted them aside, gave very astute, cute answers to the questions he was given. But you know, he's effectively stepped forward, and for my money, he's the most important person at the club. I think there's any number of people could do the CEO job. I'm not sure there's any number of people who can necessarily manage Celtic as well as Ange Postecoglou appears to be doing at the moment. So he's the most important guy, but he shouldn't be asked to be de facto spokesperson on issues such as that, as well as managing team affairs.
Paul, no. In 3 months, Ange Postecoglou has united everybody at Celtic, i.e. the people that matter, the fans, the players. You know, in 3 months, he alone has done what a board will struggle to do, as David said, in the past 18 months. Right? Everyone is all in on Ange, you know, and so I think the supporters are worried that this would affect Ange. As David said, he's a wonderful spokesman for the club at this moment in time. You know, and one of the reasons is he's come in with obdurate eyes. He's just going to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and just let you know, and his what he's seen. You know, and I know he's going to have to work with people higher up in command, but listen, he'll tell you what's going on. I mean, he's been signposting it since, you know, I wanted deals done for players. They weren't done quick enough, things like that. Back over the net to the board. You know, everybody knows my feeling. We need more players in. Back over the net to the board. You know, he just won't take any nonsense, and he'll signpost it and he'll tell you, because he's that kind of guy. You know, and I agree with David. I think he's been tremendous the past 3 months. When you think of what he walked into, a club that was, you know, tearing itself apart, really. And in a few short months, he's managed to unify everybody. He's got the team playing a decent style of football, getting some decent results. Progress is being made in an area where it matters most, on the park. Off the park, a lot of Celtic supporters genuinely couldn't care less. You know, these are faceless names, and they don't recognise with them, but they do recognise with the manager and the players. You know, that's why they support the club.
Going back to when I first started actively supporting the club by going to the games, Tony, I used to pick up the fanzines outside the ground as well as a match programme. And my fanzine of choice was at that time Not the View, which launched in 1987. And if you imagine at that age, there you go, there's the latest edition there, David. Superb. What issue are we on now, by the way? Could you just tell me what issue that is?
275.
That's incredible.
It's the first print edition in 18 months, but at least they're still going.
That is incredible. It really is. Because it gave you that bit of humour that you needed on the bus coming back to Fife as much as anything else. But what it did, Tony, is it educated me as a young man in the inner workings of a football club beyond what was happening on that green patch of grass. You know, because at that time I wanted to be reading about the brilliance of Paul McStay, the incoming Frank McAvenny and all that kind of stuff. But what the Not The View was doing was talking all about the boardroom. They were talking about Celtic need to go public. They were talking about ousting the board back in 1987. I've recently gone back to the early editions, that were photocopied efforts back then, and they're talking about all these things. They're talking about the park not being fit for purpose and all of this stuff. And it got you into the way of thinking as a young football fan that you probably shouldn't have been thinking about behind the scenes. But we're back to that point where that is the kind of focal point of a lot of our discussions at the moment, when it shouldn't be, because that, with a club like Celtic, that should be working like a finely tuned kind of engine. That shouldn't be an issue. But it seems to be. And my big concern with Ange Postecoglou is that when the Eddie Howe deal fell down, nobody could pin it on Dom. I mean, that was something that had been well underway before Dominic McKay had come into the club. But what he did say on that first opportunity with the fan media is that he was grateful that he was allowed to come into the process of getting Ange Postecoglou in the door. And I remember him saying, and this man to my right is the right man for the job, and I'm delighted for him to be here. So my big concern, I guess, is that here's Ange Postecoglou coming in to a country where he's never worked before. The man who apparently was a part of the process was Dominic McKay, who's no longer here. The backroom team that he has spoken about, and I don't just mean coaches, but, the data analysis and sports science guys that he wants in the club have not yet arrived. And I just don't want him to appear as an isolated figure at Celtic. Now, I think he's strong enough, David, in terms of his character and personality, as Tony said there. I mean, the way in which he's dealt with the media scrutiny has been very, very impressive. The way that he's dealt with situations that weren't of his making in terms of personnel has been very impressive. We've been impressed with a lot that he's done. Does it concern you, though, that he does, or he may appear as an isolated figure now that he's come here and he's got none of his own team around about him, or indeed the person who played a part in bringing him here?
Well, we certainly don't want him becoming an isolated figure. I said a few moments ago that I think he's currently the most important person at the club, and I doubt that many would agree with me on that point, certainly off the field at any rate. But I think everything that Ange said over the weekend in the immediate aftermath of the Ross County game suggested that he doesn't feel like he's an isolated figure. He kind of played down the Dominic McKay departure, distanced himself from how much influence Dom had on his arrival at the club. So it's certainly not something that we want to see happen. But it may be that in a kind of curious sort of a way that Dom McKay's departure strengthens Ange Postecoglou's hand at the club, because he is now clearly so pivotal on and off the field to everything that we do. That I think in terms of leverage with the board, he's probably in a pretty strong position to dictate terms. Yeah,
that was something that I was thinking about when I was talking to Laura, and we did mention that he seems to be in a position now, not only looking ahead to the January transfer window, but also these other figures that he wants in the backroom team. He's never really mentioned, Tony, any concerns that he has with the coaching staff. He said when he came in, listen, I'll assess the guys. They've kind of gone back into the shadows. They're not at the forefront of our minds as much because the results have been slightly better than they were under Neil Lennon nearer the end. I think when I'm looking at the situation at the moment, and I'm not comparing it back to the old days with the old board, they're two completely different scenarios, but I'm looking at a board here who dragged their heels on the Neil Lennon situation, and they should have made a decision long before they did, who dragged their heels on the Eddie Howe appointment to such a point that he was in a position to walk away from the deal at the 11th hour. And now they've appointed regardless of the reasons behind it, they've appointed the wrong man because he's no longer here, Tony. And you look at the three kings behind me, Matt Busby, Bill Shankly, Jock Stein. These three men played such a part in the respective clubs, Man United, Liverpool and Celtic, that they were almost irreplaceable. They'd been there for so long, you'd probably throw in Alex Ferguson into that kind of category as well. Brian Clough, how do you replace these guys? They're football managers, of course. But when there's such a colossal influence at a football club, and what I'm talking about here is Peter Lawwell, for example, that when he leaves after 17 or 18 years, it's almost an impossible task to replace him. I mean, Jock Stein, when he leaves Celtic in 78, the only man that could take over in the hot seat was Billy McNeil. There was no real obvious choice. And had they made an appointment from within, there probably would have been a backlash back then when it was announced in January as well, Tony. Was it an impossible job for Dom McKay?
Has Peter Lawwell left?
That's another good question. He's not left the building per se, but in terms of the decision-making process, we are led to believe that he is in a situation where he will not be influencing the day-to-day running of the club.
Well, what was very impressive was Ange's a football man, right? And he clearly demarcated those lines. But what he did also say was he got on well with Michael Nicholson. Mm. He made a point of saying that, right? Which struck me as being, I can work with these guys as long as they leave me. That's their remit, and I'll not bother with them. I'm doing this. I'm a football man, and obviously they will merge at some point because you'll need money for transfers, et al. But he made a point of saying, I got on well with this guy, the acting CEO, name checked him, said don't have a problem. So that didn't strike me as a guy who wasn't willing to work with them. And when I say I don't care about the board, I genuinely don't, because I want the manager to work on the football side of things. I want to hear from the CEO when he's telling me about figures and stuff. That's all. The only time I want to hear him speak. But when the manager says to him, I need X player, it costs X amount of money, I expect him to sign him. I expect him to back the manager, because he's shown he's got an eye for a player. You trust him now. But do you trust the board not to annoy this guy that he walks? That's the worry.
Not entirely.
Yeah, not entirely, right? Not entirely, right? So, but I trust Ange. Mm-hmm. And I trust Ange to say, as long as they don't interfere in anything that he does on the football side of the operation of the business, then he'll be fine. He'll stay. Because that's where he's happiest. That's what he's happy doing.
Yeah.
And that's why he managed to blank everything out. And that's why he managed to field those questions from the press and media, because I don't think he's interested either. He wants to be in the training ground. He wants to work with the players he's got now up until January, and then he'll turn his mind. And people keep saying to him, do you need a DOF? And he's like, I'll deal with this. Do I need a DOF? If any structural changes are needed, we'll talk about it at the right time, or we'll deal with it. But for the minute, he's trying to build up a football team that brings success to Celtic Football Club, and that, as a supporter, is what I want to see. Boardroom squabbles can,
And he's observed quite dryly a couple of times since he's been in position. He said something along the lines of, "Look, mate, I'm a football manager, not an accountant."
Yeah.
It's a kind of good one-liner, but there's a bit of oomph behind it as well in terms of what he means, and he's very clearly, set demarcation lines between his role and the role of the board, and I think everybody gets that. He's also stepped up to the plate in terms of covering some of the communications void that we've spoken about. I thought Dominic McKay probably did have a tough job when coming in. He come in from the Scottish rugby. Yes, he had some Celtic background and some exposure around the club, but big shoes to fill. Whatever you thought about Peter Lawwell, a big pair of shoes to fill, and dealing with a Celtic board. As I said before, I don't think the job per se is necessarily an incredibly difficult one. It's all the environment around it that goes with it that makes it something of a minefield, and we can only speculate as to why Dom McKay's left, but it looks like he was perhaps pushed rather than jumped.
You know, we've mentioned a few times engagement, lack of communication, David. There's a couple of things I want to run by you, see what you think here. First and foremost, there has been an increase in engagement with fan media, with the thinking behind that being that, you know, there are groups of Celtic fans who listen to various different podcasts or read various blogs, etc. And if the club are able to engage with these groups, and I think the group was probably 15 strong initially, then that can be filtered in to their various audiences. And it seems to be working really well in that respect. The one criticism I've heard, it's not coming from us, but from some of our listeners, is that it's all great and well speaking to players that have just arrived at the club or, you know, in the week leading up to a big game, but wouldn't it be better if we could get more access to the decision makers, not just in the football sense, but behind the scenes? And I don't know how, you know, receptive the club would be to that. However, this only came in as a result of Dominic McKay being involved at the football club. I mean, Tony, you know how long I have been requesting for access. I mean, since the day that ACSOM started over 4 years ago, we've been trying to get some form of access to the football club. Not always just to press conferences, but for other reasons, interviews, etc. And it's not been forthcoming. The club completely were against that. And I don't mean the media team, because obviously they are being told what they can and can't allow. Do you see it continuing? It was obviously something that was created by Dominic McKay. Do you see it continuing? And if it doesn't, Tony, what does that say about the board and their kind of attitude towards the Celtic support?
I think it'd be a major slap in the face to the Celtic support if fan media engagement is discontinued. But then I go back to it, would it surprise you? Meet the old board, same as the new board. I meet the new board, same as the old board. Whatever way you want to phrase that, you know. So that's a major call here that Michael Nicholson has now. You know, and do they want to just airbrush Dominic McKay from the record and the minute statutes? You know, well, what better way to do that than to strangle fan media at its more or less its infancy and its birth? You know, and I would imagine that you have a foreboding sense of doom about that.
I do, yeah.
You know, because, you know, you fought so long and hard to get to where you want to be with fan media engagement, and fans were enjoying it. You know, and now all of a sudden, the guy who was largely responsible for bringing that in because he embraced that was part of the modernisation culture, you know, and now he's been replaced and the CEO's supposed to be a close friend of Peter Lawwell, then you're joining dots here, aren't you? Again, you're speculating a bit.
I'd be surprised if it was discontinued. You know, I'm not inside Michael Nicholson's head, but to me, the fan media access was quite an easy win. And by and large, one or two slightly left field questions notwithstanding, you know, the club and fan media avoided too many pratfalls as a result of that particular experience. So it was an easy win. It's going okay. And I think the perception associated with withdrawing that access now would be an absolute body blow to fan-club relations. So I would be really surprised if they didn't continue with it.
But it's also a remnant from Dominic McKay's period at the club, 72 days. You know, do you take a hammer to that and just smash it to pieces? You know, if you're anti-modernisation, if that's part of your
I don't think that's what they want to do. You know, I think there's some. You know, Dom McKay did some good stuff while he was at the club. You know, I think we could all agree that he had a pretty strong transfer window in terms of concluding deals, in terms of beginning the modernisation process behind the club. And I think the people there are you know, I would think that they're intelligent enough to pick the good stuff from what he did and leave some of the stuff they didn't like so much to one side. I don't think they'll just sweep everything aside and say, well, to hell with that. We get on a completely different path. I think that some of the good stuff that he instituted, I think, will be maintained, including fan media access. I might be wrong. Time will tell, but that would be my call at the moment.
Are you sure they're intelligent enough, David?
Of course I am.
I think it would be a massive own goal And that's not just being selfish, because I just think that, if you take the 15 platforms and all the individual audiences, and there'll be crossover audiences as well, you're getting a lot of messages out to a lot of Celtic fans on a regular basis there. It would be a massive own goal, in my opinion. The other thing I was going to say, there certainly was a moment, Tony, that I felt Dominic McKay had an opportunity to really stand up for the Celtic fans. Now, this is on the back of the discussion around one of his priorities when he spoke to the fan media conference at the very beginning of the season. He was talking about getting fans back into the ground. He had the experience of doing that with the SRU, and he was looking to speed that process up. Celtic were at the forefront of getting fans back into the stadium. Now, that being said, we then came up against an issue at Ibrox where Celtic had been promised 750 tickets, and at the last minute, that the club reneged on that, and we didn't get the tickets. I think, going back to a point David made, the communication around that was poor on Celtic's part, because I think you had to take a stand at that stage. If you're the CEO, you've got to take a stand there, because otherwise it's almost as if, Rangers are just pulling your shorts down in public, and you are standing there and taking it. That was an opportunity for me, Tony, for Dominic McKay to stand up for the Celtic support, and he didn't do it. Am I being harsh, or do you agree with that?
Celtic should have had supporters into the ground at that Ibrox clash. No two ways about it. A solution could have been reached, an amicable solution. These are big club decisions. The two of them had to get round the table and act like big clubs that they are, and try to tell me that they could not have come up with a solution where Celtic got tickets and the Rangers got tickets for the corresponding fixture in January. I was quite astounded by that, and I thought Celtic handled it badly. I thought Dominic McKay handled it badly. It is, the unique selling point of any Celtic Rangers game is the supporters. I get back to it. They're the most important people. Football clubs. So a derby match with no away supporter, there's something missing there. Always will be. And it's wrong. It's just plainly wrong. And how Celtic directors and Rangers directors can't rise above this petty nonsense and sit round a table and say, OK, let's sort this out once and for all. No, and I'm not interested in he said, she said, or they started it, or whatever. How grown men acting for those two huge football clubs can get round a table to say, we'll give you X amount of tickets for our ground and X amount of tickets for the other ground is beyond me. Mm-hmm. Act like adults. It's childish.
And act like big clubs. It's something you've said before on this show. Yeah,
big clubs. Take a big club decision. And Dominic McKay had a chance there to act, make Celtic act like a big club. And yeah, I think he failed on that one. And he failed badly, and the correspondence and communication around it was very poor too.
What's your thoughts on that, David? Because I agree with you in terms of the transfer window. I mean, by the last count, and I'm obviously differentiating between players who are classed as first-team players. I think we brought in 11 permanent team members left, plus 4 loanees went to their parent clubs. So we lost 15 players and we brought 12 in. And I think that, unfortunately, when you look at the squad on Saturday there, you look at the bench, a couple of injuries throws us into a bit of disarray at the moment. Yeah. But it is only one transfer window, and we're looking ahead, obviously, to January. And hopefully the January transfer window being more active than January past. So I would agree with you in terms of transfers. I don't think you can expect to get more than 12 first-team players in the door. But one thing that I think he let himself down on, and it was a good opportunity, was the Ibrox ticketing debacle. What's your thoughts on that, David?
I don't know. I wonder if Rangers really wanted to give Celtic any tickets at all in the first place, and were just looking for an excuse not to do so. I do find it odd that there's the two clubs have so many common interests in many ways that I do find it odd that we can't seem to find a meeting with minds as regards tickets, and never mind 750 tickets. Perhaps growing the allocation back to something approaching what it was a couple of seasons ago. I only know what I've read in the press, and it appeared to me that Rangers didn't approach the negotiations in particularly good faith as regards the allocation of tickets for the fixture that we've just had. Could Dominic McKay have been a bit stronger? Maybe. I think he's a real diplomat. Make a new friend every day is his motto. Maybe he was trying to be a bit too hard on that occasion.
Make a new friend every day. I wish I had stuck to that one. I've only got about 5 at the last count. That's right. That's my wife and bairns. Who's news? Right. Fan media access isn't exactly a groundbreaking development. Well, I think it is. And I'll tell you why, right? And I'm not just singling you out there for this, but when we started the Celtic State of Mind up, one of the big fan media sites that we looked at was the Anfield Wrap down in Liverpool. Through Kevin Graham, there's been visits down to the studios down there, which were influential and inspirational into what we've gone on to build up here in Dalkeith. But one of the big things I took from the Anfield Wrap was the relationship with the club. The relationship was incredible. I mean, they travel to pre-season camps with Liverpool. They're given access to Jurgen Klopp. And I don't mean all the time, but they are given access to Jurgen Klopp. Existing players, they have interviewed Virgil van Dijk, for example. That's the Anfield Wrap. That's an independent, fan-led channel. So when we were looking at that, and I was thinking, well, the thing is, Tony, when you set anything up, you have got aspirations to where you want it to be. And I wanted Celtic to have a relationship with a Celtic State of Mind. What does that give you? I guess that's what people are asking, because, you're getting a new player coming in, you get often generic questions asked, etc. Yeah, that's one side of it. And it's great to get access to players. But you are hoping to be given the opportunity, because you imagine us having access last season to the manager, right? So you're then given an opportunity when it's not all sweetness and light, where there is no agenda, because there's no editor speaking to you in the ear telling you, got to ask this, you've got to ask that. There's no agenda. What you want is the questions that Celtic supporters are asking answered. So we never ever claim to be the voice of all Celtic fans, but what you do get on a day-to-day basis, Tony, through the comment section on the various channels, is a good idea and a good flavour of what many Celtic fans are feeling, and then you can then pose the questions to people who have influence at the club. So I think it was massive for us to get to that stage where we were engaging with Celtic, and we were hoping to grow that. And who knows where it would have gone. I think that's the importance of fan media engagement. You only need to look across the city to see how big and how influential fan media can be, both in Scotland and further afield, whereby, Tony, some journalists, some outlets were asked to come up with a bounty of 25k. Fan media outlets were able to actually pay that. And, it's incredible that the size, by the way, ACSOM couldn't. Can I just make that clear? If anybody wants 25k, we can't pay it. But it shows you the size that fan media has got to. You see some of the big channels down south with 500,000 subscribers for a Manchester United fan channel, which is 5 times bigger than Celtic's official channel. Fan media is huge, and it's only going to get bigger. So I would never write it off like that, Tony.
Oh, no, you can't, for all the reasons that you've just outlined. You spent 4 years trying to get access. It was a major victory the day you got access. It was cause for celebration. Not just yourself. What did you say? 15 other fan media outlets, something like that?
Yeah. Yep.
And ACSOM's never claimed to be a spokesman for the Celtic fans. But as you say, from your subscriber base, you get a kind of feeling for and flavour for what concerns them, what questions they like asked. So, but every other fan media broadcaster does that too. So and it's like everything else. We've got a subscriber base because they like us. Some others like other fan media broadcasters, and that's fine. We've never ever claimed a monopoly on anything. But it's a big thing for ACSOM to get access to players and the manager, and I don't think we'd want to ever give that up now that you've had a taste of it. And we await with interest what Celtic and the new CEO and the rest of the board members, what direction they want to take that in. I think it would be an own goal too if they did that. I'd like to think they wouldn't, but part of me thinks that they might think that it's a remnant from Dom McKay's 72 days that they might just want to do away with.
Yeah. Well, there's a few things that we've requested as well, Tony, going forward. I mean, there's an issue at the moment because we started the match day coverage during a pandemic when no one was going to the games. You then get allowed back into the games and there's season tickets lying because there's one thing I'm not allowing the match day access to stop. So I want to continue with the preview show and the post-match show. But we've got to figure out a way of doing that. And we were hoping to work with the club to figure out a way how I could be at the stadium and broadcast, but also see the game, in its entirety. And so we were talking about that. There was also the idea, Tony, which I still quite like, where I went to a U2 gig in 1993 at Celtic Park, and there was a confessional booth where people could go in all day and confess, and it was being filmed, and it eventually went up on the big screen. I would love to get an ACSOM confessional outside the ground at some point. Anybody can just drop in, tell us your deepest and darkest secrets, and then obviously we can use them. But I don't know how much use that would be. Oh dear, a confessional booth, ACSOM, tremendous. A few wee things to talk about before Thursday's game, because let's not get bogged down entirely. We've got a massive game coming up on Thursday. I'm excited about it whenever we play in Europe. It's unfortunate that Celtic fans can't go there. I think there's people who obviously have booked up for it and the rug's been pulled from under their feet there. So when we're looking at Thursday's game, the other slight selection dilemma I think that there may be, David, you might disagree with us. I was looking at that team line at the weekend there, and I had some concerns about Tommy Rogic. I've been delighted to see him back in the team, looking lean, putting some game time in those legs of his. But because his international career means that he does a lot more travelling than most, it's a bit like Hugo, I guess. There's long haul flights involved there. I think he did look tired at the weekend. He certainly did look tired. And I think there is a question mark around whether or not Tommy Rogic starts. If he doesn't, do we play Turnbull in a number 10? Do you draft in Sorrow or McCarthy to play in midfield? Is that an option for Thursday night, David?
Good question. I thought Tom Rogic lacked a bit of zip at the weekend as well. He didn't look the player that he'd looked in certainly in the previous home games, where the ball just seemed to be, basically on a string stuck to his boot. So, would I play him on Thursday? Probably I would. I mean, as usual, I'm sure if he does start, he'll probably play just the first 60, 70 minutes and then come off in the usual way. But I would be inclined to go with him on the basis that he'll have had an additional 4 days recuperation, and his early season form was absolutely spectacular, and I'd like to capitalise on that. None of the other options that you articulated there sounds especially appealing, but we are now, having once had an embarrassment of riches in midfield, we are now somewhat bereft of enticing options.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right.
I think this is tailor-made for McCarthy, and to push McGregor further forward. If McCarthy is fit, 100% fit, I think this is the game that McCarthy can come in and allow Karen McGregor to function further forward, because you're going to have to score. You're going to have to take something from that. I would assume might have to score more than one. And I think if McCarthy can come in and sit, then it might allow McGregor to be used further forward at the expense of either Rogic or Turnbull, I would say. Because neither nor have covered themselves in glory in the big matches that Celtic have had so far, and neither nor on Saturday were particularly impressive. So I think McCarthy could possibly come in and you make the decision on Tom Rogic or Turnbull. So that's the swap I would make. I've got concerns about that as well. Mm-hmm. And I think most Celtic supporters would, but I think we have to start now getting game time into McCarthy.
I think so.
And he has been declared fit, the manager, so he's fit. So now you've got to see what he's got.
Yeah, give him the game time and let's see what, because people have written him off. He's only 30. Which is nothing for a footballer these days. Now, I've got to thank everybody for getting involved. Also, everybody for the support over the last few weeks. There's been some tense issues that have arisen, but you've also been tuning in on a daily basis, and you've been voting for us in the Football Content Award finals. Tony and I will be travelling down to London to enjoy them. Hopefully we can bring a trophy or two back. That would be lovely, Tony Haggerty. So thank you for joining me on Twitch.
Nobody's talking about the treble.
We used to be good at the trebles. LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to subscribe and click the notifications bell, and you'll be entered into a monthly prize draw. This month, it's a series of one-off concept ACSOM jerseys. We've also been giving away platinum discs. This framed poster that was given to us by Johnny Owen, who you interviewed last week, Tony, for the Three Kings. That will be given away. There's another big framed Seville one behind us. Loads of prizes, loads of Celtic-related prizes. We'll be giving them all away. You can come to the studio to pick your prize up, have a look about, have a cup of tea, see what we do, see where the magic happens, as they say. But all that's left for me to say today is thank you once again, Tony Haggerty and David Sleight, for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.